It's not, oh, there we go. All right, so this is the Journeys meeting series. Thank you for being here again. We started last week with staying connected on the 3rd. Today, the 10th, we're doing Grieving Our Normal. This is part of our Journeys meeting series. We've got more meetings coming up, the 17th, the 24th, and the 31st. And those involve our families, our physical health, and our friendships. So that's where we're going to go from here. This is the, in case you don't know me, slide. Again, I do therapy work in the Ann Arbor, Ypsi area. I live in Milan, so I'm trying to find a hole in the wall somewhere to do work out of there, but we haven't gotten quite that far. But I do therapy work. I'm also an attorney, and I currently teach in the graduate program at Concordia University. That's what I do. And for those of you who don't know why you recognize me and swear you've seen me around, my husband works at the center. I'm Jody's wife. We live right next to the OG. My kids are coming up on Pokemon season, and they are already asking me if the dairy barn is open. And I don't know the answer to that question. So if anyone knows if the dairy barn is open, hit up the chat. I'd appreciate it. So this is what we're working on today. Grief. Right? So grief is our response to loss. Usually this is the response to a loss of someone or a response to something, particularly something that we are bonded to in some way. So this is the loss of a loved one, a job, a relationship, a feeling of safety, like after a hurricane or something of that nature, you know, that safety and stability, or our home, right? Did we sell a home? Have we lost a home in some way? Those are all things that research has told us we can bond to those things. And then the loss of those things puts us through what we experience as grief. Right? Conventionally, this tends to be viewed through sort of an emotional window, but grief has a lot of other pieces to it that are affecting a lot of us, particularly now. So grief has sort of physical aspects and cognitive aspects, where it affects the way we think, how well we're able to focus on things. There are behaviors that are impacted by our grief, things that we used to do, things that we have to do now that we didn't before. Social aspects of grief, cultural aspects, faith-based or spiritual aspects of grief, and even sort of more abstract, who am I, what am I doing here, philosophical ideas of grief that are tied in to those losses. And this is exactly the kind of experience as we're walking through COVID-19, where we would go, this feels like it fits. It feels like it fits. So we want to look at the stages, right? These are the stages of grief. And some of you are probably familiar with these, or you've experienced these in some way. And what we're looking at is not something that progresses from one to the other, right? This is not a set of stairs where you go up one step and the next step and then you don't go back, right? Grief is something that we experience on a continuum, and it's often seen as like a roller coaster. Right? Sometimes there are ups and downs in each of these areas. And sometimes it loops back and you catch a piece that you thought maybe you didn't have to deal with anymore, or that you hadn't seen in a while. So yeah, so one of the comments here is talking about, this is like what happens when you find out that you have an illness, right? Absolutely. So if we look back at the last slide, that's loss of maybe physical health, or maybe that's loss of safety, right? Maybe that's, you know, loss of control, right? And you're not in control of this illness, and maybe it's not even your fault that you have this illness. Like, you didn't do anything. Like, you weren't snorting asbestos and all of a sudden have this illness. You know, it just happened. And there isn't anything that you can do or could have done, but here we are. So there is a stage at the very beginning before denial that some people include, and that's sort of the shock stage. That's where we all start it's that gasp, right? That gasp for air when you're holding your breath afterwards and you're not really sure what to do. Right? You don't know how to respond. You haven't had the ability to process anything yet. It's that sort of like moment. And that tends to pass, although there are times that that shock feeling can be re-triggered as well. And we'll talk about some of those feelings sort of as we're going through. But the other stages and the examples of those are here, and these are the ones that we tend to be more cyclical through. So we start with denial, right? This can't be happening to me, right? And in a COVID world, that is exactly what we're looking at. Oh my goodness, this can't possibly, it's a sickness, right? This can't possibly be this bad. It's not gonna be a big deal. I don't know why this is even happening. This isn't real, right? And then we get anger, right? Anger in this case is directed anywhere, right? Anger can be directed at people who you have differing political beliefs with. Anger can be directed at organizations or at groups that have made changes that we don't like. We can be angry with our family for having different restrictions right now. We can be angry at, God or the universe for sending this illness to us in whatever way we envision that happening. We can be angry at ourselves for living in a world, in a country, in a location where this might happen. The anger doesn't have to be rational, right? In fact, irrational anger is a hallmark of grief. So if you find yourself experiencing that, just think back, right? And these are cyclical. We can experience all of these stages at any day. Bargaining. If I do this and in return, you're not going to make this happen, right? What can I do? How can I make it go away? What can I give up, right? This is when something's going wrong in your life and you go, oh my goodness, if I just never do this thing again, then maybe everything will be better, right? Sometimes people bargain with themselves. Sometimes they bargain with their God. Sometimes they bargain with their family. Sometimes they bargain with their neighbors and their friends. Sometimes they bargain with their community, right? Somebody that has control over this. Take it away, stop it, give it back, whatever it is that you're looking for. Depression is a stage that tends to stretch out in grief because it comes in waves. I'm too sad to do anything, right? The loss is too big. It's too much for me to bear. It's taking all of my energy right now to process this loss and to try and manage myself and my environment. And I don't have anything else in me to give to anyone else. I'm just too sad. I don't want to try. I'm good. And then finally, the last stage, which is the stage we want to land in, but it's not the one we're always in when grief is wrapping to a conclusion, is acceptance. Right? I'm at peace with what's happened. I'm okay. I don't like it, maybe, but I understand. I'm okay. I'm accepting that this is where I am. I'm at peace with it, and I'm looking to move forward. So these are the stages. These are my little dudes. Found these little pictures of blue people, and they made me happy, so I put them here. Thought I would share them with you. And I love Winnie the Pooh's Thoughtful Spot. It's like my favorite picture ever. So think. What do we have to grieve? Or what do we have to grieve? Maybe it's not that big a deal. Maybe it's huge, right? People have varying degrees of things that they're dealing with. People have different aspects of this that have touched their lives. So some people have real losses. Some of us have lost people. They've died during this pandemic. Some to this disease, and some just in a way that is different than we've ever seen before, right? So even if someone that you care about has passed and it's not due to COVID, right? They didn't pass of COVID. We still have a very different experience of death right now. Right? There are a lot of funerals that aren't happening. There are a lot of services that aren't taking place. We don't feel like we are able to engage in the ritual of grieving a loved one that we typically would. And so not only are we grieving that loved one and that friend, that family member, that coworker, but we're also not sure how to do that in this new world. We're not really sure how to not have a funeral, right? We're not sure how to not get together and discuss and celebrate this person's life. How do you do that when you can only have 5 people in one room that are 6 feet apart? Right? You can't have visitations, you can't have services, and even people that are able to have limited services, it's not the same experience. So we have that to grieve. In addition to the reality that actual death happens in these circumstances, we also have relationships that feel like they've died. Right? We have friendships that we've lost to distance. We have family members that we haven't seen in a long time. We have friends that we just don't get to go do anything with right now because all the things we would do are shut down. And I've had people come in and tell me, oh, well, I used to go out to lunch once a week with a bunch of my friends, but we can't do that anymore because they don't let more than 2 households of people sit down at a table. And we're still not sure what those rules look like. Yeah, maybe they can have more now, but we're not sure how it works or how many households. And it's so much effort that we can't. It's too much to do. It's too much to do. And these relationships have slowed down and they've changed. The next thing we want to look at is our routines and our expectations, right? We can grieve those. Those are real things that we're connected to, right? Like I used to, wake up and on my way to work, I'd stop at a coffee shop and I'd get my little coffee and then I'd drive to work and then I'd sit down for like 10 or 15 minutes with other people that work here in the same spot. And we'd sit and we'd chat and talk about, whatever it is that we were going to talk about that day and then, get to work. We haven't done that in like a year. We can't even all be in the building at the same time. That's silly. We have people, I think last week we're talking about exercise groups and walks in parks and just how friendships have had to change and how some of our daily routines have changed. But grocery shopping looks different right now. Lots of changes in how those things are working. And our expectations for what's supposed to happen. Like what are these experiences supposed to look like? Or when our family comes to us and says, hey, how does this work? I don't know. I'm not really sure how it works anymore. I could tell you how it worked in the before days, as my friends have started saying, and my colleagues here. In the before times, I can tell you how one would go do that. But it's not always the same, right? So how do you get together with people? When do these activities happen? There are changes in expectations about how this happens. So I'm seeing in the chat that there's some walking, right? There's some walking going out today. That's fantastic. It's probably different than the way it used to be, right? And there's going to be some excitement in the air about getting together and being able to be out. The weather's starting to break. It makes some of these gatherings a little bit easier to do. But we're not back to normal yet. And things have changed. And we have to work with that, right? Sometimes it's not It's not the activity, right? Bringing back the activity itself is wonderful when we have the opportunity to, but the dynamic of that activity and our expectations of the activity, it might not be the same. And that's okay if it's not. We just have to know. In addition, we've all missed holidays, right? We've missed Thanksgivings and Christmases and Easters and Hanukkahs and Yom Kippurs and weddings and birthdays and new family members and, I don't know, adopted cats or whatever it is. I don't know. Whatever it is that your family might celebrate or that your friends and your community would celebrate. We haven't celebrated those in the same way. They've been different. We haven't been able to get together with family. We haven't even, I mean, for some of these holidays, we were on lockdown, right? We've missed that, right? We're picking up pieces and we're going to try it again, but this is not the picture of what we thought was going to happen. You know, I've had people come in and tell me every Christmas, this is what we do, that are so upset right now that every Christmas, this is not what they did. And it might seem like a minor issue. It might seem like an inconvenience. It might seem like maybe it's not that big a deal. But to some of these people, it absolutely is a big deal. And so they're trying to work through what they do in those circumstances. How do they make that adjustment and deal with the fact that it isn't what they thought was going to happen? And most of all, we have to make sure that we are grieving the picture that we thought our life was supposed to be like right now. Right? What did we think we were going to be doing? You know, a year, COVID started just over a year ago. In fact, the governors got the flag flying at half-staff for the anniversary of the first COVID diagnosis here in Michigan, which means 6 months before that, we had no idea that this was ever a possibility, whether we agree or disagree with the steps that had been taken. We had no idea that we were going to be in for this, right? So when you think back, and I have to do this sometimes, I close my eyes and I think back to, let's see, a year and a half ago. So what, we're in 2019, July or August. What did I think I was going to be doing? What did I think my life was going to look like today? Did I think I was going to be dealing with this shutdown? Right? We've got kids at home. All of our businesses are closed. Did we think we were going to have to walk through that? Right? The center is still in skeleton operation. Restaurants are shut down. Yeah, I see it. There's a complete worldwide shutdown going on. Did we expect a year and a half or 2 years ago that we were going to be living through this in this moment? You know, we have people who've had retirements delayed. We've had people who were on unemployment that are trying to figure out how to manage. We've got families that are trying to hold each other together right now. And we have grandparents who are trying to support their children and their grandchildren because it's so much, right? Some families are doing the best they can. Others don't have that luxury of being able to do that for each other, and that's okay. We're all doing the best that we can in this circumstance, but none of us thought that we were going to walk through this. So there's no way we could have anticipated that what we are doing right now is the life that we were going to have right now. And I've heard from people across the gamut, right? Oh, well, I thought I was going to have, you know, my garden, and then I couldn't do that because there were even restrictions on what kind of plants you could purchase and what kind of garden stores could be open in the middle of all this. Oh, well, we had a wedding planned. I have a very good friend who has a young daughter who her bat mitzvah has been delayed. Like, we're right now on, I believe, 13 months almost. It's been pushed back. because it was originally going to happen in March, the beginning of the COVID shutdown. We have children who have had to have birthdays without any friends. We weren't able to go and visit them. You know, we weren't able to do those kinds of things that we would usually do. And even if we can reach out, it's not the same, right? Like I have a really great picture, and you know, I don't, some of you have met my husband, so he may have told you already, but I have a really, really great picture of Thanksgiving at our house with my parents on Zoom, right? They're in Brighton. They're not that far away. They come down every year. This was the holiday that I took over, right? Like this is my holiday. We made a bargain, right? My mom kept Christmas. I took Thanksgiving, and we said it was all going to be fine. And now it's just this terrible competition over whose holiday is going to be better. I'm kidding. It's not. My mom wins. But she was on Zoom, right? And I don't know how many of you had that experience where you've done like a telephone lunch, or you've done some sort of just different way to communicate, to keep in touch with people, right? We never thought we were going to have to do that right now. That's not something we were expecting. And the change in that expectation is something that people can grieve, even if they don't know that that's what's happening. And I think that's one of the most important things I want to look at. So sometimes we're going through a grief experience and we don't even know that that's what it is. And we touched a little bit on this because some of the things that we see in grief are some of the things that we see in trauma. So last week, our theme was sort of walking through trauma with our community and how we can stay connected to our community and address some of those feelings and those symptoms that we get from sort of going through a collective traumatic experience of any degree, right? Because a trauma doesn't have to be, you know, earth-shattering. It has to be something collective and impactful that we all experienced together that was not good. So this is one of those things. But in addition, we are walking through this grieving some loss every day. Whatever that loss is, it's not going to be the same for everyone. And some of us don't even know what it is that we're grieving, right? Some of us are just grieving. You know, that's just, it's heavy and it's weighty. We have fatigue. We have nausea, and nausea isn't always like, you know, tummy yucks. Sometimes it's in the body, just that feeling of like, ugh, in the body. Ironically, of course, we have a lower immune system when we're going through grief. Our body is more susceptible to other kinds of maladies because all of our energy is being directed elsewhere. We see weight loss and weight gain, right? Some of this is because our routines are changing. And some of this is because of stress. Some of it is because of disconnection, right? Like I'm disconnected from some of the things that I used to do that help me maintain my health. And this one we're going to come back to because we do have an entire spot, I think in 2 weeks, that's dedicated to taking care of our bodies. Aches and pains, right? When we're going through grief, our bodies ache, right? Because the emotional weight that we're doing, the processing that we're doing, the adjustment that we're doing actually is taking energy away from the rest of your body, right? And it is taking a lot. This is the same reason we have fatigue, right? The emotional energy and the brain power that it takes to get through some of these things. It's a lot. It's challenging. It's very challenging. And then insomnia or sleeplessness, that doesn't seem to have a reason. So certainly if you're excited about something, or if you are uncomfortable, or if you are, having soreness and it's more difficult to sleep, that's one thing. And that does come along. But insomnia is just the inability to sleep, right? Like I'm having just a hard time. I'm staying up thinking about things that I feel like I should be doing. In many cases, I'm hearing this manifest as, well, what did I do to be productive during this time? You know, I had all this time at home and I didn't do anything. Yeah, you did. You kept yourself like sane, like you held it together. You did the best that you could and you are continuing to trudge forward. I don't care if you did anything. I'm just glad that you are still you and you're here fighting the fight and we're doing our thing and we're going to get resituated. That's all I care about. Some people feel like they should have done different things. Some people overly exerted themselves during the shutdown and are still continuing to do so even while things are opening up, right? So I've poured myself into, I don't know, carpentry. I'm going to become a carpenter during this shutdown because why not? But now that things are opening up and I'm thinking about getting back to some of the things I used to do, I'm still doing carpentry at the same level. And I'm trying to pick up everything else that I used to do too. And now I feel overwhelmed and I find myself unable to sleep at night because I'm thinking of what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what the list is of things that I have to get done, and it's impacting on my daily functioning at this point. So if you're going through sort of dealing with this new kind of loss, or someone that you know is going through dealing with this different loss, and don't get me, I don't want you to think that this is a kind of loss that we suffer through regularly. It's not. Typically, when we're going through grief like this, when we're going through this kind of a protracted experience, you can point at it and identify it, right? So we talked about things that have those trauma triggers, right? We have hurricanes, we have war, we have famine, things like that, where you can go, oh yeah, I can see why that would be a big event. This is the exact same thing, right? So we're not looking at a war or a loss or any one thing in particular. We're looking at a loss of the way of life that we lived. We're looking at a change, a transition, because every transition is the loss of the old and gaining the new. So sometimes we see grief in places we don't expect it because we even see a positive change and we forget that there is a loss associated with that as well. And we see this sometimes when when people are separating, right? So when people are going through a divorce, even when they wanted to go through the divorce because there was something wrong in the relationship, there's still a loss, even if the result is positive. Then there are other times that we can see this in life as well, right? Job changes, right? People who've gotten promotions or have moved to better companies and better jobs. You still grieve the loss of the old one. It's just made easier by the new one. But in this circumstance, it's not, because the new one, many of us are not comfortable with. A lot of people don't like it, and it feels awkward or strange. But know that grief is normal. It's a normal thing. And your feelings are valid, right? Even if you think they're silly. Like, it's been a year. Why am I sitting here crying because I missed last Christmas? Because that's what you're thinking about right now, and because you are entitled to. Right? Your feelings are valid. It's okay to be sad about that. It's okay to be upset about that. And grief cycles. So just because something has happened that's made you think of that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, or that you are, a wreck or a mess, or you don't have it together. It means that you are experiencing your grief. And that's okay. It's good. Next, we all grieve differently. All of those ways of grieving take energy. So some people just sit and cry. Some people get really mad and are really vocal in that stage of grief. Some people take up new hobbies, right? Some people, dive into their work if they're working, or their volunteer work. Some people become very reserved as they're processing these kinds of things, and that's okay. All of these ways of processing grief are okay. But it's important to remember they all take energy. They all take not only our emotional energy, but our physical energy. And so they give us that sense of sort of tiredness. And that's all right. Now, what's very interesting about this is grieving. If you study grieving sort of as a process after an event, what we tend to see is that grief sort of, we go up a little bit, and then we hit this sadness dip, and then we go back up again during acceptance, right? So there's sort of a mood roller coaster that we had talked about just briefly. It looks like a roller coaster. It's pretty cool. But that process generally takes about a year. And the reason that we see it take about that long, based on what we're able to ascertain in the research, is that you are looking at those landmarks. Right? So for a year after the loss, you're looking at the firsts, right? The first anniversary that this person hasn't been with you, the first Christmas, the first Easter, the first graduation, right? Whatever those, for the first summer, right? The first snow, right? All of those firsts that happen in a year cycle. When you get to the second year cycle, it tends to hurt measurably less, and people seem to be much more placed well in acceptance. But we've got a really weird thing going on here, because our loss is still going on. We are now in the middle of a year-long shutdown period of some sort or another. And depending on where you are and what you're interested in, some of your things are shut down still, and some of them are starting to open up. It really depends on what you're doing, whether your jobs and your hobbies and the things that you're interested in open up. And in many cases, it involves other states as well. So if we have family in other states, as I do, I don't know if you all do, but I have family in other states. And there are rules in those states that are restricting our ability to be able to get together in some cases. So it's not just me. I don't even have control over all of this. So the landmarks that we're crossing right now aren't new yet, because we're still in the middle of that process. Now, this one is going to be familiar to those of you who were here last week. Keep informed about local goings on. I left this one here because of two things. First, the thoughts of local goings on, things that are happening in your community and in the communities around your friends. This is exactly the thing we still want to do, right? We want to keep in touch and find out what things are happening. Because as we are better informed, we are better able to adjust and to cope. Yep, I'm seeing in the chat right now that there are some family members that are living in different states who have very different experiences of what's going on right now as a result of COVID restrictions or not. So yeah, absolutely, where we are makes a difference. So this is one of the reasons we want to keep informed on our local goings on. We want to know what's open, when things are going to be back to normal for us, in terms of the things that we could do day to day. But then accepting that some of those things are not going to be normal, or accepting that there are losses that we can't recover, is not the same thing as forgetting that those things existed. Right, so we've lost businesses in our community, not many, but some. Yeah, we lose businesses in our community. We've lost people in our community. We've lost all kinds of things in our community. And so even if we stay informed and try to re-engage as a process, there are still things that we've lost. And it's okay to re-engage. It is okay to re-engage. even if there are things that are still different or there's still loss associated with it. So one of the things that I heard after our last meeting was that, yeah, there are things that, yeah, right, okay, so there's something coming in the chat right now. The Christmas store in Dundee is closed. That's a loss. That's a loss to our community. You know, they're our neighbors, right? Dundee is our little neighbor. And that's a pretty significant change. So it's going to change how we handle many things. And there are probably other stores that people are interested in that aren't too far away. We got big cousins up in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti that have had a lot of closures. And that's okay. It's okay for us to re-engage with things that we can while bearing the losses, right? While knowing that those other stores don't exist, or that certain people can't come with us anymore, or that our family members don't get to do this, or being upset that we didn't have the opportunity to do this last year, right? Whatever aspect of this is with you through your grief, it is okay to keep informed and re-engage. Seeking support, of course, normal part of grieving, completely normal, even if you feel like a crazy person while you're doing it. So I've had people tell me, like, we're a year into this thing, I feel like I was doing okay, and now I'm just really on the rails. Like, I'm exhausted. I've been doing this for so long. I've had my blasted happy face on. I've been out there telling everybody it's going to be okay. I've been helping. I've been doing my thing. And I'm so burnt out right now. And I'm so exhausted and I can't keep it up. And now I feel like I'm losing it. And it's ridiculous because things are starting to look a little bit better, but I don't have it anymore. It's not there. That's okay. That's okay. It's all right to reach out. So one of the things that's different here between grief and depression is that grief involves a cycle. Grief involves a sort of an emotional exchange. It involves reflection. It involves sort of intensity at times. But and grief is that roller coaster. It's a roller coaster. And there are good days, there are bad days, there are times that things are hard, and there are times where things feel a little bit lighter, and you can have, those good days too. But what we want to keep in mind is when we don't start to see those good days, when we start to feel really intense guilt, when we start thinking about hurting ourselves or people that are around us, when we're having difficulty just functioning in a day-to-day way, when we're having trouble meeting the responsibilities that we have at jobs or schools or with families or in our lives anywhere, or if we start to have experiences that don't seem right, if we're hearing things or seeing things that other people don't seem to see in that way, or we're just feeling immensely sad for a longer period of time, right, where we are not seeing those like little happy glitters coming through. At that point, I would suggest reaching out to somebody, because it's always possible that grief can slide into that kind of depression that does need some support in order to combat it. And that's also normal. In fact, there are about 4 different varieties of grieving that counselors and therapists work through that are just protracted, right? There's complex grief. There is adjustment-based grief. There are all kinds of grief processes. And if your grief process is getting stuck in a place that feels unhealthy and uncomfortable and is leading into a real exacerbation of that sort of depression step and that stage, and it seems to be stuck there, then reach out. See if you can get some support to help move on and process whatever it is that has got you stuck. And here we are at the end. I love this light bulb. I don't know why, but it's here and I still love it. So if anyone has, questions or comments, thoughts, anything that they wanted to share, this would be a great time to do that. My main goal here is to make sure that people that are either with us today or see this afterwards are able to see that some of what we're experiencing is because we are going through something that we don't traditionally look at as a loss experience. And we are reacting to it in a real way, right? We are grieving as a community. Like the whole community is going through this because our whole community went through the experience. We're still living in it. We're still there. So, right, absolutely. So I see coming through the comments right now that grief is different for everyone, and sometimes it's forever, and sometimes it's a few months. That's absolutely true. So when I'm saying typically when we see grief in research, it lasts, the main window lasts about a year. That doesn't mean that grief ever goes away. So it changes. It changes. And I think this is a really great point. So when we care for someone or something so much that we have this response, that doesn't mean that we never again, after going through the bulk of our grieving, think about that or feel sad about it or care for it. We absolutely do. We absolutely do. In particular, we think about these things on special occasions, right? So if you've lost a loved one and there was a day that meant someone, that meant something to that person, then that could come up again. But in these circumstances, we look at that year window, not because we think you're done in a year, right? It's not like, oh, you're all better, go on, do your merry thing, it's never going to be an issue again. But the bulk of the work that you do, like as a person, to adjust to life with this change after this loss, the bulk of the legwork is done during that period. And many people are in a place where they feel like they can move forward, even if it's not super exciting or super pleasant. And this is the same no matter what kind of a loss we're looking at. So research tells us that that time period is about the same, even when we're looking at the loss of a loved one, or if we're looking at the loss involved in like a job or a family home or something that also has an emotional connection. Spouses and children, losses of spouses and children tend to take a little bit longer to process through, and there are more landmarks. So if you have, anniversaries or birthdays with a spouse or a child, those are times where we often have grief experiences. And we have siblings. Yes, siblings is a perfect experience. Siblings is a perfect example of that as well. So I think that it's really great. Oh, we've got another note here. Somebody is sharing that they had an experience where grief after a loss of a sibling had slipped into that depressive state, and they sought help from some family and are doing a lot better. And the chances are, when you're in that moment, you don't realize that you are in that place, right? Like, you think it's not good, but it's hard to tell, it's hard to judge, it's hard to know whether it's time to reach out or not. So good for you for doing that. Good for you for doing that, and for the people around you for supporting you, because that's fantastic. And keep a lookout for your friends too, and the people that are around you. As we come back together, it's going to be important for us to check in with each other, because yes, this is a really unconventional experience, right? The losses that we've had and the changes that we've had are not going to be felt the same by everybody. They aren't even going to be responded to. If you've had the same loss experience, they're not going to be responded in the same way. So as we're moving back towards normal, we have to be working together to support ourselves in this sense of recovery and grief, so we can get to a place of acceptance where we know that our community suffered through this, that we fought through it, that this is where we are, and it's okay. And we can move forward from it, even if we didn't make the best decisions while it was going on, even if we felt at the time like there are things that we could have done, even if we feel somewhat responsible for something, right? I don't even know what. Maybe you think it's your fault that they don't have Taco Tuesday anymore. I'm not really sure. They do have Taco Tuesday. Don't let me scare you like that. Taco Tuesday is real. It's fantastic. Go eat at Peppers. Not a paid spokesperson from Peppers. My kids just insist on eating there all the time. Mommy, can we go get the tacos and cheese? Yes, dear. Yes, dear, you can have tacos and cheese. But as we're going back into the world and we're putting all of this back together, it's really, really important that we're supporting one another, that we're keeping our eyes out to make sure that our friends, our community members, and the people that we're working with, we see them and we acknowledge when things are hard for them, and we hope they acknowledge when things are hard for us. And if it looks like somebody needs something, if it looks like someone needs an ear or needs someone's support, it is okay. You can reach out to support someone else or to get support yourself. We are all in this together, and it is going to take work. Yes, I see in the chat right here, it may take some real work to get everything to come back together. And that's true, not just for us individually, but as a community. We're going to have work to do. We're going to have a lot of work to do. It's been a while. It's been a while. And a lot of the things that we used to do, people are getting out of the habit of doing. And it is going to take some time to get everybody moving in a direction that they feel comfortable and safe. Whether or not, people's thoughts and worries are realistic, I don't know. I'm not into that. It's not my thing. I wouldn't know any better than any of you what the real risks might be out there in the world. So what we're hoping is that as we're all getting more comfortable and as we're ready to walk back out and get ourselves together, that we're helping each other and recognizing that once that happens, we still have a year where we need to spend the time, work together, forgive ourselves for being tired or cranky or sore or grumpy, because we are going through a really long experience that's going to take some time to recover from and to process fully, just like any loss would. And we don't know what that's going to look like or how we're going to do that or how our neighbor's going to do that. So I encourage you, reach out to the people around you when the time comes and be willing to have these discussions. Be willing to share where you're coming from and ask if there's anything that they need and be open. And because we're there for each other as we go through anything that we need to go through after this experience. Thank you for coming.